All right, guys and gals, we are back from our short break there. I have to tell you, we are always excited to have new speakers on Note C.A.M.P. Now, the lady I'm getting ready to bring on is not by any chance a brand new speaker. She has been around a while. You may know her as the Note Queen. We are so honored to have her, though, speaking for the first time on Note C.A.M.P 5.0. So give a big round of applause to the lady, the myth, the legend, Miss Dawn Rickabaugh. Yeah, woo!
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Scott. How generous. And it sure is a privilege to be on here. I appreciate you including me. Super fun. So I'm looking forward to just offering as much value as I can for the people that are spending the time to be here at your event. And so just like we talked earlier, if you could just encourage people to engage, I like a super informal sort of venue. So how's that going to work again? You're just going to take chats or something?
Well, the people will pop up with Q&A or chat roll, and I'll just moderate it as it goes along. So I'll be listening here.
All right, so
it'll be good to go.
I'll just go here, huh?
Yep, you're good to go. Yep.
Okay, so Dawn Rickabaugh, NoteQueen.com, and the title of my talk and what I love the most is what I call the dance between property and paper. And here you can see just what that looks like. Some people weren't sure. So I had my son and his girlfriend animate this for me so people could exactly see what that dance between property and paper looks like and how you can get to cash, whether you start from property and go to paper and go to cash or the opposite way around. So I have a few fun visuals that I hope will be helpful for people. Just a quick disclaimer, this is for educational and comedic purposes only. Someone who calls themselves the Note Queen shouldn't be taken that seriously. Whatever, talk to people who know, right? Note Queen it's super fun. I really, really love this conversation. To me, once people can learn this, what I call the dance, and move as easily between cash and property and notes and property and notes, the amount of solutions that can be created in the marketplace are just exponential. So I'm just going to just dive into this, and if there's anything that comes up and people want to chat with me, great. But here we have property, and I don't know if my mouse is going to do anything. No, it's not going to let me. Okay, so we've got property up in the top, we've got paper in the right bottom, and cash down in the left. So this is my whole little conversation. I want you to be able to get from cash, we know how to do that, into property, and then from property into paper, right? Carrying it out. But then this is where it breaks down. That last move from notes into cash is the piece that I think is the Achilles heel for the general population, for sure. And even so many real estate investors this seems to be such an obscure concept, and they don't know how to turn a note into cash the same way they can turn a property into cash. So that's a big focus of mine, is just filling in the gaps for people so that they can be a lot more fluid and not get stuck and know how to navigate, depending on what they want. So you can go from cash to property to paper, back to cash again. And obviously you can go this way, just like, Scott and I and a lot of others buy notes. A lot of times that note turns into property, and then that property turns into cash again. So basically, just to set the stage, a secured versus an unsecured note. This is a guy who has an unsecured note, and he's not feeling so happy because there's no collateral securing his note. It would be like a personal note. It would be like credit cards, things like that. And just to be clear, we're talking here in this presentation about secured notes. And this guy's feeling rather cocky because if the payments from that don't come in, he's got something behind him that'll help him recoup his capital. At least that's the idea. Sometimes some of the notes we buy, or if it's a mobile home in a park, it can feel like it's an unsecured note, right? So anyhow, but we're talking about secured promissory notes in this presentation. And I like to kind of set the stage of how I like to see visualize the market. What's the playing ground? Where do I put everybody? You know, how does it all fit together? So this is and I'm not Jewish, although I greatly respect this symbol. I think it's very powerful for a lot of reasons. But it just so happens that it's perfect for showing this. We've got three principles in the marketplace, right? We've got property sellers, property buyers, and passive note investors. Those are principles. And any one of you can stand on any one of these dots, right? And you can switch in between. Then we've got, just expanding passive note investors is like banks, private lenders, and seller carrybacks, people who carry back paper on property they own. And then in the secondary market, note buyers that buy from the other three. And then we also have three professionals in the marketplace. We have real estate brokers making a buck between property sellers and buyers. We got mortgage brokers making a buck between buyers and passive note investors. And we've got note brokers who, you know, except for the people participating in conferences like this, nobody knows what that is. So if that, there again, there's that Achilles heel that if we can just educate the public and especially more real estate investors and professionals, then we can create so many more solutions. So any one of you, in my opinion, should technically be able to stand on any one of these dots, right? I know there's a lot of licensing issues on some of the other ones, but just not addressing all that licensing stuff. You can see that no matter where you're standing, you should be able to make money and solve problems. So now I'm just going to expand on the passive note investor you see on the right lower hand side of the screen. Okay, passive note investors. This is where notes come from, the primary market or note originations. We have banks who loan money. We've got private lenders who loan money. And then we've got owner will carry property sellers, and they don't lend money per se, they lend equity, which is simply a lot of money that's stuck inside the house, right? So they're lending their equity. And then we have the secondary market, or where there's assignments being taken. Instead of originations, you're taking an assignment of a note that was originated somewhere else. Now, typically the banks, you know, sell off to Fannie and Freddie. That's the secondary market. But we're all here in this conference mainly as discounted note buyers. I mean, some of us are owner will carry property sellers. Some of us are private lenders. And if we're not any of those, we're discounted note buyers. So basically, you know, I can buy a note or take over a note from a private lender that wants out, or if I've originated some paper and in my company name, I can do an assignment, right, to somebody else. So the private lending often works very similarly. Just people don't think of it as the secondary market. They go, oh, well, the private money broker just assigned me the note, but it's the same process as when you take an assignment or buy a note from a bank. And a lot of you people that are buying bank paper, institutional paper, you know, this is the whole game, really big and sexy since 2008 and all that happened. And it's a really hot side of the market that most people have come to the point where they're identifying what the note business is by this whole non-performing bank conversation. But in all the years before the big crash, the note business meant buying owner carry paper. And that's what I focus on. I either carry paper on property that I own and I'm selling. I do a teeny bit of private lending, but I have a whole big portfolio of discounted paper. And all of that is from mom and pops. None of it is institutional, just my preference. Okay, so basically I'm just gonna, you know, this is going to be redundant and simplistic for a lot of you, but for the people that are new, I'm going to just go over and over till you can see all these circles connecting together and get you comfortable with the flow and the ease of how this works. Okay, just visuals that can help you hold it in your head. And I hope this is meaningful and fun. Okay, so you can, if you've got cash in your cash sector, you can, we know this, you can buy property with cash, just keep it as your home. Okay, simple. Okay, you can buy as your home, you can buy with cash and a bank loan. If you don't have all cash to buy a house, you know, this is normally what we think of. Most people go, this is just the only way that the market works. They take a down payment, they give it to the seller, and then they go to a bank who brings in the bulk of the money. And in exchange, they, you know, they're on, if I did this, then my signature, my original signature is on the note and deed of trust, my promise to pay to the bank because of the money they lent me. And if I don't pay, the bank yanks it right back out. Right? So every month, I pay the money to the bank according to the note and deed of trust that they have against my property. Okay, now this is what I did. When I moved from Southern California to here in Carson City, Nevada, which is not by Las Vegas. In fact, I'm twice as far from Las Vegas now than when I lived in Southern California. So I'm right by basically Lake Tahoe and Reno, half hour from each one of those. And it's Carson City is the capital of Nevada. So when I got here, we rented a place sight unseen because there was only one place for rent in the whole city that was big enough for us because, you know, I need a home office and my wife needs a home office. She's a professional illustrator, artist. And so we needed a 5-bedroom home and there's only one. So we just rented it sight unseen for a year. Turns out that we loved it and it was owned free and clear by the landlord. So we asked him if he would carry because we just do not get bank loans. It's sort of a religious, I would put it in that category. We just do not get bank loans. So we do not deal with institutions any more than we have to. So basically, instead, I didn't pay all cash. So what we did is I took a big fat down payment and I gave it to the seller and asked him to become the bank. So his equity, see all that money that's locked up in his house, he lent it to me. And that equity turned into a note and deed of trust. Remember, just like we saw with the bank, except for it's a mom and pop. It's just the seller. So basically, I take my money and it goes to the guy who used to own it, except for he's now the lender, right? Does that make sense? All right, so taking another one, I can buy property with cash and hold for rent. That's very common. So here's what that looks like. Your cash turns into property and turns back into cash flow for you. If you buy property with cash and a bank loan, you put your down payment and the bank provides the rest of the money, just like before. You know, your signature, your little John Henry is on that note and deed of trust. You're responsible. And you collect rent and you keep a teeny bit of it, but then you pay your mortgage. See? So you know, if you would have bought for cash, you got to keep bigger chunks of money. But now you keep a teeny bit and you go to the bank. Now, this is another one that I do. Of course, I don't use banks, but this next one is buy with owner carry and hold for rent. So we just go through this again. You put your down payment. The seller lends you their equity. It turns into a note and a deed of trust. And you can see that, you know, you're going to hold for rent, keep a little bit, you know, just like the other one. And the rest goes on to the guy that used to own your property, but now is the lender, right? So I'm just getting you familiar with how these work. We've done a ton of buying of property, right? And turning that into cash flow. So now let's see how it works when you're buying paper or a note or a deed of trust or a mortgage, all of the very similar things. At a discount with cash, right? So you take a big wad of cash and you buy a note. You turn that cash into paper and that paper turns into cash flow, little bits of money every month coming into you. You can buy discounted non-performing paper, right? Or sometimes your performing paper falls over, life happens, and that nice performing note that you bought turned into a non performing note, which means the payments aren't coming in anymore. And so basically that note that you bought, you foreclose and you turn it back in to property and hold it for rent.
Right? I love this, Dawn. I love your illustration. So great. So great.
Okay, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. You know, for me, a lot of times the fun visuals help me keep something in my head that can otherwise seem a little abstract for some people. So, right. So you turned that cash into a note, you foreclosed, you turned back into property and you rented it out and you got some cash flow from it. So that's awesome, right? You're not getting interest income, but now you're getting rent income. But then some people don't like that, especially if it's not in your hometown. Maybe, I mean, there's a lot of people who do this very well, long-term turnkey rentals. But for me, if I'm holding something long-term for rent, I just like it to be in my backyard, like actually within an hour of my house. So, but anyway, but this is fine. So you've got that coming in. Now what you're going to do is let's say you want to sell to your tenant. They've saved up their pennies and they can put a decent down payment, right? The sweat equity stuff's hard if it's tough if they put a small down payment, especially if you're going to want to sell the note, right? But let's just say they got at least 10% down and you decide now to sell your property to your tenant, right? You get some down payment and now they start paying you according to the terms of the note. So now remember, you started out with cash, you bought the note, paper turned into property. Now we turn property back into paper again, and you see that you keep getting cash flow no matter which way you go. Isn't that awesome? It's nice to be fluid. So, but then what if something else comes along? You need money, you got another deal. If you've put that note together well, then you simply sell the note and turn it right back into cash again. Can you see how many ways there are to make money no matter where you are on this diagram? Right. So the thing is, depending on how you've created the terms and the value of your collateral and everything else, the strength of the borrower depends on how much you will get for that note. So if you go in it knowing what you're doing from the beginning, you'll get an outcome that you're much happier with. Most people, they carry paper and they don't think of it. Their real estate agent doesn't think of it. Their attorney doesn't think of it. The title company doesn't think of it. They don't think about what is the value of this note that we're creating right here worth on the secondary market in case the note holder has to sell or he dies and his kids inherit it and they have to sell. So that's really, like I said, that Achilles heel where people don't think of underwriting the owner carry paper with the eye for what will the secondary market think of this note and how much cash could I get out of it if I had to. Okay, wow, I'm just going on here. Little drink of water there. Okay, so basically we did this, right? I'm just repeating this, boop, 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 right? You buy with cash and a bank loan, hold for rent. So just repeating that. Now you can buy subject to. Now the thing I want you to see on this is under the deed of trust, it's not my signature. When I sign a bank loan and it's my name, my John Henry on that dotted line. When I take a property subject to someone else's loan, it's not my signature on the note or deed of trust. Yes, I still have to, pay that, right? I mean, obviously it's got to be paid. If I give let's see how this works. Can't remember how I did it. Yeah, so I give the down payment to the seller, and I take over their, and I'm keeping a little rent, but I've got to make sure that the bank gets paid, right? But it's not my signature there. So I'm buying subject to, holding for rent. Same as before. Now here I am buying subject to, and I'm selling on an owner carry wrap. So I'm buying subject to someone else's loan, and then I'm not keeping it for rent. I'm just turning around with owner carry to someone else, leaving that existing financing in place. So what that looks like is I make a down payment, give it to the seller, subject to their bank loan, and then I turn around and sell it for more. So I'm getting a bigger price for the property probably. And I take a down payment and I get a bigger note and a bigger deed of trust. So this is my concept of a wrap. You can see that existing bank loan is still there, but I'm wrapping it with my note. Let's say, I bought the property for $100,000 with 5,000 down and let's say 5% interest, right? And maybe my payment is $500 a month. Well, I turned around and sold it for 120, took 20,000 down, and I'm carrying it 7.5%. So you can see that the face amount, the value of my note, the UPB, the principal balance is bigger on the note and deed of trust but I still have to pay it, right? But mine's bigger. So I'm taking in, not only did they sell the property for more, not only did I take a bigger down payment, but I'm bringing in maybe $700 a month, and I'm only paying out $500 a month, right? So I'm paying, and I'm keeping a piece of it. See, that's my arbitrage over there in the left lower. That's arbitrage. That's my yield spread right there. I'm borrowing that other person's note and deed of trust, not my signature, right? I took it subject to. Okay, we know this one, okay? This is the flipper model. This is what everybody thinks of, HGTV, sexy house flipping thing, right? Easy. So you basically tons of hard money. Usually you take a big down payment, you get a loan from a hard money guy, and he has a note and deed of trust. See, these are all, no matter if it's a bank, a private lender, or an owner carry person, you still end up with the same instrument, a note and deed of trust. You basically make bigger payments usually, typically speaking, and then hopefully before very long, sooner is quicker for most people. You sell that property for cash, you pay off extinguishing the loan, and you pocket your profit there. And then also you pay a big chunk of change to the IRS. That's always very fun too. Unless you've listened to Walter and some of these other guys that talk about how to really minimize taxes or eliminate them altogether in some instances. Okay, now here's buying with cash and owner carry terms to do my rehab flip. I like to do this. I could borrow expensive money. Of course, my cost of capital is pretty low at this point compared to most people, but still, it's more expensive. If I'm paying 7 or 8% on a loan, someone's lending me, that's more than I would have to pay if I can talk the owner into carrying the paper and being my hard money lender. Hey, if you'll hang out for the next 6 months, I'll pay you 10 grand more for your house, because then I don't have the cost of capital, right? So a lot of times, basically, it's okay, I'll give you a big down payment, Mr. Seller, and you lend me your equity instead of me going to a hard money lender, and I'll pay you on this note and deed of trust, and as soon as I flip the house, boom, we all get cashed out, right? So it's just one way that I can, number one, have cheaper capital, and number two, pay the homeowner or the property seller a little bit more, basically paying them to originate the loan for me. So I always like to go for owner carry first when I'm buying a property, or whether I'm, for a long-term hold or for a flip. I always try owner carry first. That's my first thing. Next is, my private lending partners, and never, ever the bank. Okay. Now, how about I buy a property with cash? So that cash turns into property. And then I sell on owner carry terms. I turn that property into paper. Remember? So now that new buyer is paying me, the lender, and I'm getting interest from the note. Well, what if I don't want to sell the whole note, but what if I just want enough to get my seed capital back out, right? So that I can go out and buy another property, and I keep the remainder payments on the note. So I'm going to sell a front end partial. So here's what this looks like. So now I got some friends, I have lots of mom and pop private investor partners. Okay. So they give me the money for, let's say, the next 5-7 years of this note. I give them a full assignment of the note and deed of trust. So now if I don't pay my friend Bill here, if I don't pay him, right, then he gets to keep the whole property. Even though it's only like I've sold him a partial, he takes a full assignment, right? So, or if I die, something happens to me and my whole family gets wiped out at once, he has the ability to take over that asset and take it. So basically, all the note payments, instead of going to me, go to Bill until he's paid off. And then after that, after I've paid him what I've promised, right, I start getting those payments. And that remainder payment, that's where the juice is for me. This is a great way for me to build my retirement. Well, I can take my active capital and buy properties, do owner carry, sell off a partial. I get my seed capital back. Usually I'm not taking a ginormous profit on the front on these. I'm leaving my profit for down the road, for 5, 10, 15 years down the road, when those note payments will start coming back to me. When I'm even older and crankier than I am now, right? and I don't want to work so hard. I'll sit back, and hopefully my health is still good for backpacking and skiing and things like that, right?
We got a question from you, Don, here. For you, Don. Somebody is anonymous, says, when you wrap, what are your terms you sell at to make your position safe? I mean, what is the principal, interest, and term? I mean, it's going to vary a little bit, obviously, been on the underlying debt, but you're most of the time you're not going to be buying a loan that's got a 12% interest rate on it already. You're going to buy something that's got traditional bank financing in the lower or single digits, right?
Exactly. So obviously, good point there, Scott. You can't, when I'm wrapping, I can't give better terms than what I've got on my underlying. They kind of have to match, right? Or pay off sooner. But, every deal is, what do the buyer and seller agree on? What can they afford? What is the market saying about what it's worth? Usually I try to have some arbitrage where if I'm paying, if I've taken over, I've taken over this is one of my rehab long-term holds, and I'm in the middle of rehabbing it. And it will be a Airbnb or VRBO for me. It's in Washoe Valley, right between Carson and Reno. And this was awesome because the PITI on this, the principal, interest, tax, and insurance, and this property is worth about $800,000, and the note, they still owe like $600,000, but the PITI, they had this, is only like $1,800 a month. So they had this like 1% loan modification that they got, and then they just needed cash to get out of town. And because of the deferred maintenance, they couldn't, after everything, they wouldn't have been able to get much equity out of it, and they were out of state anyway. So I just gave them some capital, and I took over their 1% loan. Isn't that pretty awesome? On a property worth $800,000, I come out $50,000 out of pocket, and I only have to pay $1,800. That was less than I was renting my house here.
Wow.
Right. So in that case, if I was selling it, I had to make 2 points just charging someone 3%. But I know for sure I can get them, depending on if I get my price, if I can get my price, I'll give terms that the buyer will agree to. If they say, oh, I'm not going to pay more than 5%, you can see that I'd do really well with that, right? I'd have a 4% spread. I would have a 4% spread. And, but if I got my price or a little higher, or if someone says, I'll give you more down, or I have less down, then okay, I'll bend over and pay your 6 or 7%. So it just depends on the deal and the asset price, right? The lower properties, 150,000 or less, act very differently than a high-end property, obviously. So the strategies differ. So did I even answer that, do you think?
You answered it perfectly, because basically when you can find somebody's got some equity, they're motivated, they got a low interest rate, you're just going to arbitrage, up to what the market will pay. Somebody, if you could owner finance that property at $800,000 and 8%, great. You got 150 or 100, after you put 50 into it in equity, and you're getting 7 points on the interest spread. So yeah, you totally answered it, Dawn.
Okay, great. So it just depends, but it's always, you can't offer better than what you've got. Don't extend a balloon payment or a maturity date past what your underlying is, or else you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Who handles your paperwork on that? You have attorney and standard forms that put the wraparound or the subject together.
At this point, I've had enough attorneys work on things that I just, use their templates and stuff. And then I usually have Evergreen, because they're local here in Reno. They handle my local paper generally. But I don't know if they like wraps or not.
Well,
I can't remember if they do the wrap.
Yeah, a wraparound's not difficult. I mean, there's attorneys that do. If you do enough of them, it's pretty easy paperwork. And then we got somebody asking about the due on sale clause. Look, yes, you might potentially trigger the due on sale clause, but the only time I've seen a due on sale clause is when somebody reaches out to the mortgage company and say, hey, we're going to end up buying this, when they didn't send in a transfer of information form. I've only had one. Actually, I take that back. I only known of one due on sale clause that's been enforced on either any of the subject twos we dealt for years. It was because somebody was an idiot and didn't pay. And as long as the bank's getting paid on their mortgage, they don't care most of the time, right?
Yeah, and so it's the statistical likelihood is pretty small now. I don't know if some institution interest rates rise enough, and then they're looking for any reason they can to call notes due. Maybe they start digging a little deeper. But there's ways to be not be waving a banner. There's ways for it not to look so obvious. Like I keep them on the insurance. I become an additional insured, things like that. There's a lot of things you can do not to be so obvious about what you're doing. But anyway, there is a risk of that. And that's a good point to bring up. And if I'm selling it, if I'm, in the middle on this, I make sure to do all my disclosures so they know darn well that, things beyond my control could happen, and they'll need to scramble. Somebody's got to scramble to replace the financing if the loan's ever called. So good point to bring up. But I love just creating solutions, and that nothing's a golden hammer. Nobody has a crystal ball. No one has guarantees in life, but we can do a lot of things to enrich ourselves and solve problems for buyers, sellers, and passive note investors if we can just comfortably learn how to navigate. And it's like financial yoga, being able to stretch in every which way position and make money and solve problems no matter what comes at you, right? So moving on, basically, now I know this is also repeat, but just for the new people, this is what I've come up with, another way to illustrate how an owner carry note is created and sold, because I still get people who go, wait, but if you carry paper, is that even legal? And is it even a real sale? And I go, yes, it's a real sale. It's just the beneficiary on the note and deed of trust is a private party, is the seller of the property, instead of an outside third party like a bank or a private lender. So basically, here we go. Here's my other little animation of how this all works. We've got a house in the middle. The buyer wants it. They've got a good down payment, 10% or more. The owner will carry seller at the top. He's got a lot of equity. So he's willing to lend his equity to the buyer. So the buyer pays a big down payment to the seller, and the seller lends their equity to the buyer. And in exchange, a note is created saying, I promise to pay you $800 a month for the next 15 years, whatever it is. And if I don't keep my promise on that promissory note, well, I got some bondage going on here. I got a security instrument, in this case, a deed of trust. Other states, it's a mortgage. So basically, if you don't keep your promise to pay on the note, then the note holder, in this case, that used to own the property, can take the property back, right? So you got it. Then, but you get the same thing as any normal sale, even a cash sale. It's the same, except for no note and deed of trust, right? The buyer gets an owner's title policy, just like normal. And the owner will carry seller, the owner turned note holder, turned lender, landlord to lender, gets a lender's title policy. A lot of, when you're going to do owner carry, don't let anyone talk you out of not getting a lender's title policy, because if you ever decide to sell that note, it's going to make it a lot cleaner and tighter and less expensive transaction to do down the road. And the buyer we've got an insurance policy. So the buyer is the named insured and the seller is the mortgagee or loss payee, or however it is in your state. So that is the anatomy of an owner carry deal. Now, if that seller decides that they want to sell their note, then they come to it, get a note buyer to give them a bunch of cash, right? So the note seller assigns the note over to the note buyer. They assign the deed of trust. This is recorded in public record, assignment of deed of trust. And you need both. You should have the original note and an original longe or assignment, however you do it, or an endorsement on the back of the original note. You get an assignment of deed of trust recorded in public record. You can get the lender's title policy endorsed over to you if you wish. That's something you can do to button it up really tight. And I know there's some other things that can come in, but this is a nice way, just simplistic way to think of it. The note buyer then becomes the mortgagee. Now the buyer still owns the property, still has an owner's title policy, still is the named insured on the hazard insurance policy, but the note buyer stepped in to take the place of the guy who sold the property, who then was the lender, and then decided he'd rather have cash, right? So the seller says goodbye, and the note buyer says hello, and the buyer simply has a change of servicer, right? Just start sending the payment. That is how, ladies and gentlemen, you buy a note. That is how complicated it really is, right? So it's so mysterious until it's not. And then it's like, oh my gosh, it's really makes so much sense. It's so easy, right? And if you use the same servicer, let's say I was talking about Evergreen, if I buy a note that's already being serviced by them, I don't change servicers, because then the borrower doesn't upset their life at all. They don't have to get worried about it. They don't have to remember to send their payment somewhere else. They keep sending it to Evergreen. Evergreen, the servicer just sends it to me instead of the other guy. So it's super simple and very easy and non-traumatic for the buyer, and their terms don't change at all, right? Does that make sense? Okay.
Oh, totally does. Totally does.
Okay. What time is it even?
2:40 our time, so you're doing good.
Okay. So what makes for a good note? You see our little baby note? Now, owner financing gives birth to the note business. So you like my little baby note? So if you want a healthy little baby note instead of a bad right? So what makes for a good note? A desirable property that appraises for as much or more than it sold for. And in a reasonably populated area, right? Because if I get it back, I don't want there to be like 2 potential buyers, like population 300, you know? You want there to be a reasonable pool of potential buyers if you end up. Large down payment, that's hard equity. That's protective equity. It protects you from future losses. Owner occupied 10% or more, investor 20% or more. These are just generalities. And I will have to say that more is better, because anytime I've tried to reinvent the wheel and try out different, my own underwriting things, and if I go outside of the fundamentals, I usually end up finding out why the fundamentals are the fundamentals. Good credit or no credit, you know, better credit gives you a better price for your note generally, especially if you want to sell to the larger buyers. You know, the larger institutional buyers usually look at credit, the ones that'll pay you the most or the highest loan to value or investment to value. But for me, I always am thinking like a hard money lender, where I like there to be good credit, but it's not a deal breaker, because if I'm collateral based minded to a high degree, because I just want to know that if they don't pay, that, you know, if they put 50% down and I bought the note at, you know, 85 cents on the dollar, I probably have a lot of protective equity there. Seasoning and payment history. you know, more seasoning is better. It's like on paper, you can't over salt it. You know, like on food, you get too crazy with the salt shaker, you can over season something. A note can't get too much seasoning. You can never ruin it. You know, more is better, especially if the payment history they have, you know, gosh, 5-year history of paying on time for 5 years straight. Now that's really tasty. That makes your note really seasoned well and very tasty to a note buyer who will pay you more for it because there's less risk. You want the highest interest rate, known as the face rate, on the note that the borrower will accept and can afford, right? If they can't afford it and you put them where they're scrimping every month and then life happens, that's no good. So that's why you get, in a lot of instances, especially if you're doing this on a regular basis, you use a registered mortgage loan originator, NMLS licensed person, and they can underwrite this, prove the ability to pay so you don't look like a jerk if you end up in front of a judge like, hey, you were predatory, you didn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they have the ability to afford this deal, right? So the higher the interest rate, the better, because if the lower the face rate on the note, usually the bigger discount, because it's farther away from the yield that a note buyer wants. So if I need a 12% yield, and your note is written at 5%, that's a lot farther away. You know, 5 and 12 are farther away than 8 and 12. So the closer the face rate on the note is to my desired yield, the less of the discount. Is it short term, you know, or amortization schedule? You know, is it, I don't like it too short though. Like some people go, there's only 3 years left on this note and I'm willing to sell it to you at a 15% yield. It's like, yeah, but then that's only, I can tie up, you know, $70,000 and only make 4,000. So sometimes the financial calculator can kind of lie to you on the yield, but you know, the sooner money comes back, the better. But sometimes I really like buying those long notes because statistically they'll pay off early, and that's when you really make bank, right? I like there to be a balloon if it's allowed in that situation, not on owner occs. That's usually not a great idea. I don't like those too much, but if they have a high degree ability to be able to pay it off, a balloon is kind of nice. If they don't, or if it's owner occupied, I act as if that balloon isn't there. And I act as if it's going to has to fully amortize off, because I'm not going to foreclose probably on a homeowner just for going past the maturity date if they can't refinance at that time. So I have to buy knowing that I'd still buy this note at this price, even if the balloon doesn't hit it. But if it's an investor deal or some sort of commercial thing, a lot of times a balloon can help the present value of the note. I like there to be a default rate in there so that the interest rate starts stacking up meaningfully while you're having to pay money for foreclosure and forced place insurance, blah, blah, blah. It's nice if there's a pre-negotiated extension or modification fee built into it so that you don't have to get at the point of saying, you know that you're going to get something if you extend the loan for something and it's already predetermined. That's kind of nice. I like notes where there's favorable foreclosure laws, and I like notes with title insurance. A licensed servicer is a very, very helpful, if not absolutely necessary in most instances, especially owner carry paper. I almost always impounding for taxes and insurance makes it stronger. And if I'm buying a note or I'm originating a note, I want a due on sale clause and a late payment provision. If I'm buying with owner carry terms, I don't want a due on sale clause, right? But anyway, so this is if I'm buying a note. Any questions, comments, things I've missed? Big fat things, Scott?
No, you're good. So Ryan just says, "Note Queen, you must share your slides, please." People are loving it.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, so I would definitely, I consider that. Oh, here we are back to the dance. This must have been a break time when I used this last. There's the dance between property and paper again. Now I'm going to take a breath here, and we are already 45 minutes in. So, Okay, I am going to go back just to these conceptual things to help drive them home. So we have, this little Star of David here that is my representation of a balanced, harmonious playing field. Like I said, if you can make money and solve problems from standing on any one of those little orange or green buttons, then you're like a Jedi master, right? I mean, this is awesome. And you should be able to easily slide over there, like Twister, whatever, something. Step on any one of those comfortably. All right, buying property with owner financing. Okay, so I'm a buyer. I'm right here. I'm standing there. Fair market value on this little deal is 135. I got it under contract for 100,000. This was a little deal in Bakersfield that I did way back in my early days. After, I didn't talk about my background, but actually I graduated from BYU with my RN degree. I was an ER and ICU nurse for many years, and I also popped out 3 babies and got a stepson during that time. So I had 4 kids, and I was working as a nurse, and I started, learning about these concepts. So this was, and then in 2004, I quit my nursing job and just said, hey, gonna make it real. I'm just going to go for it. And anyway, so this is one of my first deals I did. I bought it for 100,000. I put 5,000 down. So that's a tiny little down payment. Did you see the little money show up on the right lower part of the screen? The note amount, right? So I owed, my internet connection is unstable. I hope you guys don't lose me. It's a windy day over here. Are you still there?
You're good. You were here. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So I bought it for 100,000. Put 5,000 down, and I have a note for 95,000. The interest rate is 5%, fully amortized over 30 years. Is this awesome? Owner carry terms, no banks, no origination fees, no appraisals, nothing. Super quick, close in 7 days. Is this great or great? This is great, right? I love this deal. I love this deal, right? So that then this was not really in my backyard. It was 2 hours away from me at the time. So I really don't want a rental even that far away. So I wanted to turn it around. And so, my monthly payment was $509.98 on that. Okay, that's what I owed to the seller who became the lender. The seller of the property carried for me. She became my lender. I gave her the down payment, and I still send her $509.98 a month. So, but then I didn't want to, like I said, I didn't want to keep it. So I became a property seller of this same property. And I bought it and resold it inside of 2 weeks, I think. Okay, so then this is what I sold it for 122. So I got a bigger price that I was talking about before. This is just visually represented. I took a 20,000 down payment, which you can see is a bigger down payment. The note amount is bigger because I sold it for more, even though I took a bigger down payment, right? So my 102 note is wrapping that $95,000 note that I owe to the little old lady who sold the property to me. Now I become a passive investor. Do you see that I started on the one orange and I went to the top orange, and now I'm at the bottom orange one? Do you see how easily you just move around? I want you to be so flexible with moving all around on these. The interest rate on that 102 is 7.5%. And I amortized it over 30 years because I could, but I made it due in 10 so that there's a balloon that they're going to have to renegotiate with me at some point, right? So I didn't oversell. I made the terms tighter than what I already have underneath on this. And the monthly payment to me was $713.20. So you can see that everything's bigger. So that's how I made money. I made 15,000 right up front because I took 20 in and I only put 5,000 out. So I put $15,000 in my pocket right there. I got $203 a month for 10 years. So that's $24,000 in just arbitrage, the spread, yield spread. I also make $11,250 in the difference in the amortization, right? Because the 5% loan is amortizing faster than the 7.5% loan, right? So the balance that I owe my lady is only 77, and the balance that the new buyer owes me is going to be 88. Check that out, right? That's sort of invisible money that just sort of shows up. Gosh, from a teeny weeny little house that I bought for 100,000, you're going to tell me by willing to play the paper game and this owner financing hoo-yah, I can make $50,000 over 10 years? Are you kidding me? You know, if I was wholesaling this, I might have made $5,000 wholesaling it to somebody. Or if I rehab and flipped it, I don't know, you know? So I love this owner financing notes game quite a bit. Okay, now, if I had to, if they couldn't, they get to 10 years. Now, this was not a primary residence. This was a rental from this person. So, right? So this makes it a little different for me than an owner carry. So what if they can't refinance and they were having trouble, but I just sort of gave them time because they kept their loan current, but they were having a hard time getting refinanced. And, you know, they liked this as a rental property, but, you know, refinancing was hard. I gave them time, but if I had to take it back, it didn't work out that way. I'll tell you, these slides don't represent it, but I'll tell you this, how it really worked out. The fair market value was 100, so it was less. The values had gone down from when I first got involved in 2007. The rents coming in are 900. I figure 65% expenses. Net rent profits, 585. Then my note payment to the underlying is 509. So basically, even if I took it back deed in lieu and kept it as a rental, I'd still get $75 a month in income. That would, you know, that'll put me back though. I'd really rather sell it, right? And because I don't want these long-term rentals. So instead of being a passive investor, I think I messed up on that. But anyway, I'm back to being a property seller, right? So anyway, that is my little, I promised to tell you the story. So they were having trouble. And then finally, like almost a year later, after the maturity date, they were able to push a refinance through. And so they paid me off. Remember, they owed 88 something. Well, they were able, and my little lady, she didn't want to be paid off, right? Because she liked the income. It was income for retirement. She could defer her capital gain, and that's what she wanted. So we did a substitution of collateral. So I just took the proceeds from that refinance, and I gave my little lady that I pay the $509.98 every month. I substituted collateral. So I just walked the mortgage. So then what that does is give me shake loose 80 something thousand that is just private money. I get to borrow it at 5% and do whatever I want with, basically, right? So that's really, really valuable. Okay, now I could do this. Is there any other questions or anything you think I should bring up at this point?
We do have a question from Alicia. What are your favorite areas to invest in states-wise?
Well, if I'm buying and holding property, which since I moved out of LA 4 years ago, I've added a lot of property to my paper portfolio. I was heavily in paper, and I go, I need some property. And so I like that to mainly just be in my backyard. So I've added 4 or 5 properties, all either bought cash or owner carry. Everyone says in this market, you'll never get owner carry. Yes, that's funny because I've bought 4 properties with owner carry here. So anyway, so for me, I like my backyard. If I'm buying a note, it can almost be anywhere. I don't particularly like the mortgage states. I don't like New York, New Jersey, Florida. My pricing has to be really, really good. I've had some weird stuff happen in the Northeast kind of states. They have like they're a different country over there, the way the courts work. And
Totally are.
I got some weird stuff happen with a note I had to foreclose on in Connecticut. So, and luckily I did okay, but it could have gone a lot worse than it did. So, anyway, so I like the deed of trust states mostly, but, you know, depending on the price, you know, you can justify almost anything. So,
right. Question for you: how are you marketing to find your deals? Just word of mouth, or through your network, or what? Are you doing anything?
Yeah, so I've never been a direct market person, although I think I'm going to add that in for at least my local market. So if anyone's already doing a bunch of direct mail and they want to put me on their list of direct buyers for the Northwestern Nevada, I would love to be on your list. But once in a while, I'll write little personal notes to people. Mainly it's positioning. I've spent a lot of time just, I started blogging back before everyone knew if blogging was even what it was, and just built an online presence. Then I started speaking and all this. And so a lot of times I just have things that come to me because of referrals and my positioning in the marketplace, but it's not like it was cheap, right? I spent years and a lot of time and a lot of sweat, getting to the point where people just know who I am or find me or whatever, right? My SEO is, I think, okay. But anyway, I've got a handful of people who bring me deals regularly every year. I've got a few that I find my own. Heck, I've even had a few that I bought right off Craigslist. It's the weirdest thing ever. I just create a little filter for promissory note or owner would carry, whatever. And I bought a couple 3 notes off of Craigslist, which is kind of silly, but it works, right? So you got to spend time and money somehow. So do you have more time than money? Do you have more money than time? What do you love to do? I love to educate. I love to write. So it's like, this is a natural, it's not as much work for me. If you're going to do direct mail, and it's going to cost you a lot of money, you better be really good. Better be good at keeping track of it, being consistent, and tracking your results. So anyway, any other questions? Because I kind of actually want to skip down, because this is a deal that I could tell you like it's crack to me. Like when I can take a problem and turn it into 3 solutions for 3 sets of buyers and sellers, like I really get a natural high. I'm serious, but it's a little thick and a little deep. Okay, so if I have time, I'll go back to it.
That's fine. We got one question. Zip asked a question. One thing that has always confused me when you folks say wholesale, are you speaking of the property or the contract?
Well, people are familiar with wholesaling. Repeat the question.
When you folks say wholesale, are you speaking about the property or the note, the note or the contract? He's asked 2 questions to clarify, and I'm not sure exactly what I'm following.
Okay, so everyone knows, not everyone, but most people are familiar with wholesaling. It's a lot of people, the way people get introduced to investing in real estate. They go, I'm going to make some wholesaling fees. You get a property under contract and you sign the contract for a fee. But it works the same in paper. Whatever you can do with property, you can pretty much do with paper. So someone who gets a note under contract can flip it, can assign the contract to the end note buyer for a fee. The handful of people that bring me deals, they go, they find out what I'll pay, then they go make their offer, create their spread, whatever money they can make on it, given the circumstances. And then I take over their contract with the seller, and then I pay them their fee once it's closed. So it's the same thing with property. I take assignment of the contract, and either it comes out of escrow or it comes on the side after close of escrow. It depends on your relationship and trust level with the people. So you can buy and hold property, you can buy and hold paper, you can wholesale property, you can wholesale paper, you can make money. Remember, see my little diagram here. You can make a buck, putting a deal between a buyer and a seller. You can make a buck, over there on the note broker side, or finder fee, or wholesaler, whatever you want to call it, by putting owner will carry paper together with a note buyer. I hope that helped. So anyway, just
perfect.
I've got 15 minutes left here, and I just want to give you an example of what it looks like. What it looked like for me when I was the new kid in town. I came from LA, sort of battered and bruised, and the population density and everything just stressing me out. So move up to Carson City. There's 55,000 people right here. Of course, Reno with 350, 400,000 is a half hour north. And I got beautiful Lake Tahoe, a half hour west. But I'm the new kid in town, renting a place sight unseen in a new town. And I go, I want to start playing. And I hadn't done a lot of property. Like I have this fairly sizable portfolio of owner carry paper that I bought at a discount, mixed in with a couple of loans here and there. But I'd never really done the property thing. And like, I was kind of scared, and I was kind of intimidated. I mean, most people, they do the property thing, and then later in life, they play the paper game because it's easier, right? It's less work or whatever. But I was sort of born breach here because I came in through the paper side, and I knew all the minutia of things that are so arcane to most people, but I didn't know how to do the property thing, and I really wanted to. But I just had to start playing somehow. So what I did is I came across someone who needed $11,000. Am I going to make a ton of money loaning someone $11,000? It was a favor loan. No, I'm doing it to build relationship and just start playing somehow. And it was an investor who wanted to buy and hold a mobile home and rent it out. And because I meant that, so I didn't make the little animations for this. So you can see that I was a lender, right? That passive investor up on my diagram there, I was a private lender. So I was on that little orange knob there. And because I did that, I met Doug, who was the broker that put the deal together. Okay, and because I met Doug, he introduced me to the manager of a mobile home park in Carson City, right here in my hometown, that had a note that she wanted to sell. She had sold another mobile home in that same park and carried the paper on it, and she needed the cash. I think there was only like $15,000 note, and I bought it for $10,000. So that was, actually a pretty good price for her based on how she had the paper written. It only had 3 years left to go. So instead of being a private lender here on the right-hand side of the screen, now I became a note buyer, but you can see I'm still on the orange button of passive investor. So I bought that note. It's not because I made a killing. I mean, it was fine. I don't know. I probably had a 20 or 30 or 40% return, but it's a little teeny bit of money, but I did it for the relationship. And it's because you take what's offered, what's in front of me. How can I take all the different things I know how to do, create relationships, and start doing something? And because then I bought her note, then she goes, hey, I know a guy inside my park that's been trying to sell their mobile home. And I go, well, I've been trying to get into the property side of it, like carrying the paper and all that. So I go, okay, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't know what it was really, really worth. I just said, well, I'm going to get my seminar. So I bought it for 11,000 cash. Rehab and holding was 4,000. All in, I'm in for 15 grand. I sold it quick for 21,000. Not a huge, right? Not a huge gain there, right? But I got paid for learning. And what did I do? I show that I'm an action taker, and I keep the ball rolling, the momentum going, and I sold it on terms, right? And to the buyer. And then I sold a piece of the note to get some of my money back. And because I did that, I show that I do clean business and I'm an action taker and I create results. Then we get into my big mobile home project that I did in that park. I moved like 16 mobile homes down from Lake Tahoe. And it was like, when my property manager saw this, all these mobile homes, he was going to help me rehab. He just said, can I just burn them all down instead? That was what he wanted to do. But anyway, it was a huge project that I did inside this park. They had 20 empty spaces. I filled up 16 of them. Pulling down these homes from Lake Tahoe. They were going to basically close down that mobile home park and build a big resort there. So they were giving them away for free if you just get them off the lot. And then I blustered my way through this deal because I go, well, I've never done anything like this, but because I know how to move between property, paper, and cash and create solutions, just one mom and pop to another, I trust that I do the best calculating I can. And ultimately, it's like you follow your intuition, whether you should take the next step or back off. So I did a big project like that. This, like I said, I was already describing this. So I'm just going to switch down to, instead of describing that whole mobile home project, I kind of just want to get into anyone know who this is? You know who this is, Scott?
That's Henry Ford.
Very good. Ding, 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 ding. You're going to win a prize at the end. I don't know what there you go. basically, okay, now we know we can make money and create solutions, but to me, this whole conversation about becoming comfortable with owner financing and notes and the secondary market for notes, it's so important. Now, Henry Ford, one of his most famous quotes was, "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." For anyone who has no clue why he would say such a revolutionary, dramatic thing, you need to wake up, take the red pill, and start studying about the absolute horror and dread and wealth sapping activities of the Babylonian money slave system that we are in. Basically, here's my son with his artwork again. And someone who calls themselves NQ, I have no idea who that is. The wealth vampires on Washington and Wall Street would prefer that you sit back and do nothing. It's easier to suck your financial blood when you're docile and distracted. Folks, you deserve to lose your money if you are not willing to wake up and take charge. I'm sorry to say that, but it's just really true. You know, the warning signs are everywhere. It's way beyond conspiracy theory. Just please wake up. And it's so important that we learn to create financial solutions just one mom and pop to another. It's like the reason that I had chickens in my backyard for several years. It's the reason I go to a farmer's market for my food, and why I will never ever step in a place like Walmart. I just won't do these big corporate things. I hate them. Local, this is like local, organic, free range, non-GMO financing. These are the types of financial solutions that we need. It's tree hugger type, right? It's tree hugger, but like you can see that you might want to call me a tree hugger, a weirdo, or nuts and fruits from California, but I've already proved that I can make money with it and solve problems for people. I'm providing home ownership. All that mobile homes that I did and rehabbed, 75% of them I carried paper and gave a chance at home ownership to someone who was stuck in a rent cycle. So, and the stronger I make my community, the more money stays in my community. People own, they feel less stressed. When they pay off their loan to me, they have more money to spend on their kids, to go out to dinner once in a while. More money stays in my community, which makes it better, stronger, more resilient to any economic future. Basically, and just another little nugget, I've raised 4 kids and I've had 2 marriages, and relationships have been a huge part of my life with spouses and with kids. And I will say I had a therapist that I worked with for several years, and basically all successful relationships come down to direct nurturing and clear boundaries. It ain't rocket science, guys. Direct nurturing and clear boundaries. This also happens to be what makes for a successful landlord or lender. Now, direct nurturing, you don't have to be all like weird, about it, but you do have to have compassion. Life happens to people, but you also have to have clear boundaries. So I've found that taking the same principles that I've made for successful relationship. I've been married for the last 24 years now, and I have excellent, phenomenal relationships with my 4 young adult children who all are in their 20s. In fact, they're my favorite people to hang out with. My family is, no lie, my favorite people to hang out with. That's because of learning communication skills, direct nurturing, and clear boundaries. And when I'm a lender, I'll work with you, I'll be human, but the minute you jerk me around, boom, I'm not doing you any favor. Just like my kids, tough love, got to get booted out of the house, time to move on. Life needs to give you some feedback to do something different. So anyway, I just want to introduce people to, if you've never been to my site, notequeen.com, one of my favorite things that I do, seriously, in a whole month is my virtual coffee Q&A call. It's a free call that I host once a month, usually near the end of the month on a Friday or Saturday. It's my sort of pro bono, I just love that call. So we talk about anything having to do with owner financing and notes. You can submit a hot seat application, so I can give, if you get picked, then I talk about your deal, answer your questions or your specific thing directly. I love this. So please go over here to notequeen.com and just sign up. See, there's a little login thing that you see there that's highlighted. Go log in and create a free Note Queen account and come over and become a citizen of the realm. I might as well keep going with it, right? The Note Queen thing, become a citizen of the realm. And you can see on the right that I have lots of free resources, and I've assembled a portal where you can access all of my free content. There's a little bit of paid content down below that you can't see if you join the royal court. But really my main thing is just getting the word out there, because if people can have fun doing what I'm doing in my backyard, and we do this kind of thing all over the country, oh my God, we can change things. We can change things. We can just starve these middleman, corrupt middle people on Washington, Wall Street, and all that, you know. So my thing is we can liberate and enrich ourselves and our communities, and it's so important that we learn to take charge of these things. So anyway, I just love being a thought leader. I love taking these things and just doing them in my backyard. Not a big guru type person. I'm really too disorganized and ADD actually to get really things together. That's what it comes down to. I do have, last year I started my first, this is the thing from last year. You can see, didn't have a chance to update it. My first live event I'm going to do, it went so well. It was so phenomenal. I'm going to do the Property Paper Summit again this year on October 1st and 2nd. Please go over to propertypapersummit.com and you can just bookmark that and put it in your hopper for seeing if it's a good fit for you to come and just spend some really deep, intimate time with these concepts and with people that are just living and breathing it. So anyway, that's kind of all I got, unless if there's specific questions or you feel like no, we're at the end. I did good. Yay.
You're good. We got a couple questions. One of them, any recommendation for books on the banking system that you would recommend, Dawn?
Gosh, there's so many. Something about Jekyll Island.
The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Yeah. So you see, if you join my little account here, and it'll get you to this dashboard, the Citizens of the Realm. You see on the bottom, it says links to resources. I have a lot of really great links for people. So go there. It's just everywhere. I mean, you freaking just have to like Google it and just unplug from mainstream media. And you know, there's just a lot of people that I follow. None of them are on cable network news at all. So there's a really important, momentous things happening. It's just gonna be a hell of a year, I think. But we need to be prepared. And I'm going to tell you guys, you know, I don't like to, you know, my personal philosophy is like, I expect the best, but I prepare for the worst. So you could kind of say that I'm kind of a prepper, and I'm pretty conservative when it comes to my property and paper acquisitions. And I want to know that no matter what happens in the market, I have more than one exit strategy. Let's say if prices tank and people start having, I like to create refuge. I like to hunker down. I like to be smart. Doesn't mean I hide under a rock, but I have my affairs in order, right? I mean, you should, before you're thinking about investing in a note, if it's the first time you've ever done it, make sure you got a little extra cash in the bank. You got some cash hid under your mattress. You got some gold, you got some silver, maybe diversify into a little crypto is not a bad idea. I have guns, I have food, I have water. I've got, you know, like if everything goes to hell. Now I am very positive and I live a very happy life, but I have a lot of peace of mind because shit hits the fan. I'm relatively, as best as I know how, to be prepared. Does that make sense? And then I go, let's be conservative and have some fun and make things happen. So that is my personal philosophy right there. But please go check out the links to resources there. If you create an account, log in over at notequeen.com. So, and I have a podcast, and like that Q&A, virtual coffee turns into a podcast. And so anyone who wants to tap in deeper, I really feel blessed when people spend their time to listen to what the Note Queen has to say.
Well, we were a bit honored to have you, Dawn. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and fit us in. I know you're juggling this event and the other one, but once again, great stuff, great insights on stuff. Definitely Love all the concepts you share with people, and I think a lot of people got stuff out of whether they're brand new or seasoned well. I love your philosophy and how you really, hey, you make that dance work. You do the what's the word I'm looking for here? Not the limbo. You do the paper property two-step. That's what I was looking for.
Oh yeah, hey, yeah, there you go. And I am going to learn how to two-step. I before I die, I'm going to be a really good dancer. So
awesome, good stuff. Well, hey, we will let you go get back to it. Get ready for our next speaker. Have a great weekend. Be safe, and we'll talk to you next week. All right, Dawn?
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
All right, guys, that is going to wrap it up there for the session. We're going to take a quick 15-minute break, and we've got our buddy Darren Adams going to come on to show you how to attract, sell, and wow your clients, your database, the people you work with, whether they're sources, whether they're funding people or buyers of your stuff. So come back in 15 minutes. Go get you a quick break, quick drink of water, restroom break, and be ready to learn some great stuff from Darren. You're going to love his presentation.